It's October 19th, 1991, and tragedy has just struck the village of Elne, near Perpignan.
Two families in Elne are living in fear of the worst. Yesterday afternoon, 10-year-old Ingrid was celebrating her birthday with her cousin Muriel, also 10. At 4 p.m, the two girls asked permission to go for a short walk. When they hadn't returned by 5 p.m, the parents raised the alarm.
I don't get it. They wouldn't have run away. Either they went for a walk, or they've been kidnapped.
2 helicopters, 200 rescue workers, police officers and firefighters assisted by 70 volunteers are scouring the area, all to no avail. The two girls have disappeared without a trace.
Every inch of land, every abandoned cabin is inspected multiple times. Days go by, and Ingrid and Muriel, both 10 years old, are nowhere to be found.
Near Perpignan, the search continues for the two girls who have been missing since last Saturday. But the more days go by, the more likely it is to the police that they have been abducted or kidnapped.
A witness claims to have seen a man in the village near a white car. It isn't much to go on. Roadblocks are set up just for the sake of it. But the investigation bogs down, hope dwindles, and by 10 days after the disappearance, there's hardly any hope left. Muriel's father makes an appeal to the kidnapper. It's a national tragedy.
I don't see why anyone would want to hurt children. They're so little, they just want to live. If he's listening to me now, nothing will be done to him. Every one of us. The whole world, or all of France at least, agrees with us. He must return the girls as soon as possible.
A twist of fate relaunches the investigation. Someone calls the police with the man's name. The police check up on him. The man was in the area at the time of the incident and has already been convicted of paedophilia in the past. This could be a good lead. They must act quickly because the girls may still be alive. The suspect's name is Christian Van Geloven. He's arrested in Saint Dizier, 800 kilometers away from Elne, and taken to a police station. It's 3 p.m. when he's taken into custody. Custody is a measure of constraint imposed by a police detective on someone who's suspected of committing or attempting to commit a crime or an offence. In France, it lasts a maximum of 48 hours. This 48-hour period in custody has been reconstructed by actors based on police interviews.
My name is Christian Van Geloven. I was born on April 18th, 1945 in Eindhoven, in the Netherlands.
When we first brought Vangeloven in, we had nothing to go on. The only positive points were that he had a white car and a polo shirt, and a witness had seen a white car. That was it.
There were no bodies, no children, and no direct connection between the children, their disappearance, and Christian Van Geloven.
Thank you. Here's your coffee. So you know why you're here, right? The public prosecutor of Lourdes has ordered we investigate further following your suicide attempt on October the 21st at a hotel in Lourdes due to the disturbance to public order. So I need to know more about your life, your career, and why you did it.
2 days after the disappearance of Ingrid and Muriel, Vangeloven went to the sanctuary at Lourdes. That same evening, he attempted to commit suicide in his hotel room. He was then repatriated to the psychiatric hospital in Saint Dizier, near his home. Policeman Tony Mendoza used this suicide attempt as an excuse to bring him in, without expressly telling him that he was being taken into custody.
I introduced myself and said, "National Police, Mr. Vangeloven, we have an investigation from the Lord's Public Prosecutor's Office, and we need to interview you at the Saint Dizier station." He said, "Okay, no problem. Should I pack my things?" I said, "No, it's just an interview. You'll come in, I'll ask you some questions, then I'll bring you back." He didn't put up a fight. He just got dressed and followed us into the vehicle. What do you do for work?
I work in import-export.
And where do you work?
I'm between jobs. I was laid off. I'm registered with the unemployment office.
We had come up with a strategy, some way to cheat. We had to make him believe that we were local investigators who were bringing him in to tell us why he had tried to commit suicide, how he had done it, why he had decided to do it in Lourdes, and so on. All of that was supposed to lead us to our investigation, or so we hoped.
It's illegal. Anyone who's being questioned about an offence they may have committed has the right to know what it's about. Otherwise, it opens the door to all kinds of police custody without any legal barriers.
We totally cheated. Totally.
In order to come up with this interrogation strategy, head investigator Johnny Gendre sought to gain a better understanding of his personality. In an unusual move, he went to see the psychiatrist who'd been treating Vangeloven for a year and a half, hoping that the doctor would be able to give him the psychological keys he needed to question his patient.
I asked him if he could give me some information, knowing full well that he could refuse on the grounds of professional confidentiality, of which I was well aware. But to my surprise, he gave me a very simple explanation of Christian Van Geloven's personality, that he liked to have the upper hand and was a notorious pedophile. He added that he was very likely to have committed the kidnapping I was investigating.
The psychiatrist also adds that Vangeloven must not be rushed, otherwise he will remain silent. Deputy Chief Gendre then comes up with a strategy that runs counter to the more usual interrogation practices: the funnel strategy.
The funnel strategy consisted of talking mainly about his life, what he was like, and then little by little, I wanted to lead him into much more precise details and ultimately find a direct link with the disappearance of the girls from Elne. In the beginning of the interrogation, you're very high up in the funnel and you don't know if you'll get to the bottom of it, but that's how the strategy works, and it had to be him who took us there, not us.
And why were you in the south?
I was looking for a job.
It was decided that we would avoid using certain words like rape, kidnapping and murder, so as not to provoke the detainee. Do you travel a lot for work?
Yes, of course. I've been all over the place, travelled all over the world. For example, I've been to the United States, where I lived for a year and a half, Japan too, Asia, Australia, Côte d'Ivoire, everywhere. I've been put up in 4-star hotels in rooms that cost $1,000 a night.
The man we had in custody was no thug. He was a guy who probably had some weird stuff going on in his head, but was very intelligent. So we had to be careful. That's why the team came up with a whole strategy, starting with the sound system in the office. We decided to fit a power strip with an FM microphone inside, and in an adjoining office, we installed a tuner.
First I worked for Arbois for 5 years, then I worked with Philips, where I became product manager.
And the investigators outside could follow the interview.
I was laid off in December last year.
The second ploy is to reduce the furniture in the interrogation room to the bare minimum.
There was nothing. No flowers, no pens, no machines, nothing. It looked like an operating room. That was to prevent Vangeloven from focusing on an object, so his attention wouldn't be diverted. All of his attention was on one person, the interrogating officer. Are you married? Do you have any children?
Yes, I got married in 1970 and I have 2 children. Eric, who's 21, and his sister Claire, who's 18.
Okay. The strategy Johnny came up with was written out on a flip chart. We wrote out the teams and the different missions. My mission was to hear his first version of who he was, about his upbringing, and with whom he'd been raised. The first team had to start by getting to grips with the individual, getting to know a little about his flaws and weaknesses, and building up his confidence. We had to let him talk, and let him come to us.
I'm the second to last in a family of 6 children, or rather 11, 5 of whom died. Very poor family. My dad ran a bistro. He was a huge alcoholic, and my mum never really took care of me. In fact, at the age of 4, she gave me away, or rather sold me.
Sold you? What do you mean?
Yes, she gave me to her sister. She had good money and a good husband.
Were you happy living with them?
Yes, they took good care of me, financially anyway. They gave me away as if I were a cat.
When you're dealing with someone like Vangeloven, you know that if you tell them to stop complaining, they'll shut up. But if you play into their hands, they'll feel obliged to give you some grist for your mill. And well-informed investigators who know what they're doing will be able to get some interesting information out of them.
Were you the only child in this adoptive family?
For a very long time, yes. For 10 years, until I was 15. I was at boarding school at the time, and they came to see me to ask if I'd like to have a little sister. I said yes, because I didn't know what it meant. And it was terrible. They adopted a little girl, an Italian girl, who was 2 or 3 years old at the time.
Why was it so terrible?
Because my adoptive mum never took care of me again. Only her. It was as if I'd been abandoned for a second time. They adopted her, not me.
As is often the case, Vangeloven wasn't telling the whole story. In reality, the roles were reversed. His half-sister, who was interviewed by Jean the day before Vangeloven's arrest, gave a completely different version of what their family life was like.
She told us that starting at the age of 5 or 6, she had been raped by Christian Van Geloven regularly. And that's when I realized we were dealing with one hell of a pervert.
Was it revenge against the girl who had taken away his exclusive right to maternal love? Perhaps it's in these perverted beginnings to sexual experimentation with a child 15 years his junior that they will find the first symptoms of what Vangeloven calls his illness.
For him, it was a way of asserting his opposition to Isabelle and his desire to hurt her, because she was the cause of his suffering and exclusion.
Let's talk about your suicide attempt. Why Lourdes?
I went there to see the Virgin. I was waiting for a sign.
You're religious?
Catholic. I'm a non-practicing believer.
Did you get a sign?
I arrived just as the doors of the basilica were closing.
But why did you want the Virgin to help you? What did you want a sign for?
Because I'm sick.
What do you mean by that?
It's got me into trouble with the law.
What kind of trouble?
Last June, in Saint Dizier, I was prosecuted for public indecency.
For what reason?
Took my clothes off in front of some little girls by a river. They were taking a walk. Nothing serious.
Vangeloven talked relatively easily about his sexuality because, in his eyes, it was normal. Ultimately, he saw his conviction for paedophilia as a moral and social one. But Vangeloven, like most perverts, didn't agree with that sense of morality.
Were you convicted?
I got a 2-month suspended sentence and 3 years probation. My wife made sure the story didn't appear in the press, which pissed off one of the mothers. So she started taking it out on me. She managed to find out where I worked, at Oberflex. She started going after the receptionist, caused a big fuss.
Did you understand why she was mad at you?
Well, yes. She was an unemployed local woman who didn't want a manager to escape justice, but I just wanted to start over on the right foot without anyone knowing. Naturally, I lost my job. And that's not all. As a result of how relentless the mother was, the enforcement judge asked me to leave the region, which I took very badly.
Understandably.
Well, yes, because after all, I owned a house, my children were in school, and I was seeing a shrink regularly. I was doing everything I was supposed to do, and she just forced me to leave.
That must have been difficult.
It was to put an end to all that I decided to look for work in the south of France.
Did you make the whole trip without stopping? It's a long way.
No, I made a few stops along the way. For example, I stopped in Orléans.
Why Orléans?
Because of my illness, again. I stopped in front of the prison.
In front of the prison? Why?
I was in prison there.
Why were you in prison?
True to their strategy, the police pretend to know nothing about Vangeloven's past, even though they're fully aware of his criminal record.
He'd been convicted for kidnapping a minor, a 7-year-old girl, or a girl between the ages of 7 and 10. He took her in his car, brought her to his home, tied her up, and made her perform oral sex on him.
I was attracted to little girls. I never did anything bad to them. I just drive them around a little while and then let them go. I was never violent.
When we realized he was downplaying such a serious act, we started thinking he might have done something even more serious.
In 1983, the experts decided that Vangeloven wasn't dangerous, that he could be reintroduced into society without any problems, and that he could change. And so the court, taking into account this expert opinion, was lenient.
I was sentenced to 2 years in prison. In the end, I only served 13 months. And since I found a job as soon as I got out, I vowed to go and see the Virgin in Lourdes to thank her.
At the time, sexual cases were considered minor. In addition, certain expert reports were taken into account, which misled and deceived the magistrates.
I've been seeing a shrink for a year and a half.
And this paedophilia, because yeah, that's what it's called. What is it for you? Is it a disease?
I know I'm sick. I want to get rid of it at all costs. I have urges. You know, uncontrollable urges.
How do you explain this illness?
I've talked about it with my therapist. He says it's because of my childhood. I should tell you that I was a victim of rape and indecent assault. It was in 6th grade and it lasted for 2 years. My Latin teacher. He gave me special lessons, very special indeed. When I didn't do well, he spanked me. When I did well, I got a blowjob.
When he was telling us about his problems, we gave him the impression that we understood and that we weren't there to judge him. As a result, he gave us even more explanations and tried even harder to justify himself to us, and we felt like we were becoming his confidants. Prison probably didn't help, did it?
Oh, no. No. It's horrible. Hell, it destroys you. It's absolutely useless. It was there in front of the Orléans prison that I decided to commit suicide. That evening in my hotel room, I put my hands around my neck and I squeezed. I took some sleeping pills.
And you went straight from Orléans to Lourdes?
No, I stopped in Collioure. A friend had lent me his apartment there.
When did you leave?
I left Collioure on Monday morning and headed for Lourdes. I arrived at 7:30 p.m. that evening. When the grotto closed, I decided to kill myself.
Anything more to add, for now?
No, I don't think so. I told you everything.
Well, then let's take a break. The first phase, which I had been entrusted with, was quite successful. He told us about his paedophilia, his problems, and his trip to Collioure to look for work. We were already in the thick of things. We already had a paedophile in Perpignan with a criminal record.
At that point, we still had a small, very small, hope that the children might still be alive. And because of that, we were obliged not to rush the questioning process. We had to stick to the strategy I had decided on at the outset. If we didn't, we might hit a dead end with our person of interest. And if that happened, we'd have nothing, neither a confession nor the children.
It's 7 p.m. and night has fallen on Saint Dizier. During the past 4 hours in which he's been recounting his life, Christian Van Geloven has left many grey areas, in particular his trip to the Perpignan region. After only an hour's rest, it's time for the second team to question him. Their role is to figure out where Vangeloven was on the afternoon of October 19th. That sunny Saturday when Ingrid and Muriel went to play near a telephone booth. What did he do? Who did he talk to? And was he in Elne that day? That's what the second interview is all about.
My mission was to get him to talk about Elne and the little girls. It was a highly exceptional situation. There was enormous pressure from the media and the hierarchy. Nobody wanted this to turn into another Grégory affair. So it was... well, there was no room for error in this case. What car were you driving?
My own car.
What did you take with you?
Suitcase with my things and some classical music records.
Anything else?
In the trunk, I had a pellet gun, a TV, a sleeping bag, my shoes, 3 pairs.
Is that all?
In the glove compartment, I had a knife, a scout-type knife.
Why did you bring a rifle with you?
It's a pellet rifle. I bought some ammunition just for fun during the trip. I never had a chance to use it in Saint Dizier.
If you look at what he brought with him, it made no sense for someone who's looking for a job. It was more like someone who's going in search of something else, and in this case, given the context, it was very easy to imagine that the knife and the rifle might have been potential weapons that he could have used to take out the little girls from Elne.
Can you tell us where you were on the Friday before your suicide attempt?
Yes. On Friday, I drove all day to get to Collioure. When I got there, I went to the agency to get the keys. The next day, I slept in quite late. Then I headed straight for Perpignan. Wanted to visit the old town.
What time was it?
2:30 p.m. It was market day. Talked to a shopkeeper and he told me I should buy the local paper on Mondays.
L'Indépendant? Why?
For the job ads. He told me they came out on Mondays.
You expected to find work there?
Why not?
It's a long way from home.
It's okay. So on Saturday, I took a stroll around the old town. Then I left at around 6 or 7 p.m. and went straight back to Collioure.
By the same route?
Yep, the same way. I got hungry on the way home, so I bought myself a slice of ham at a little deli.
What did the butcher look like?
Around 40 years old, 165 or 170 meters tall, rather large.
People who have nothing to hide don't tend to remember many of the details of what they've done. But he was very precise, very specific about what he had done. I saw such and such a shopkeeper, I talked to him for so many minutes, I left for such and such a place, I took this specific road. He was very, very, very precise.
In this case, it gave him an alibi.
What did you talk about?
I don't know. We closed up shop together. Then I went home. I ate a little, watched TV, went to bed. I took my medicine and slept well.
We had teams on site whom we called on. We checked to see whether or not what he was saying was true, or whether he might be mistaken or simply lying.
And on Sunday?
On Sunday, I got up, tidied up, then I ate some ham. Not all of it. I gave some to the neighborhood cats.
This is ridiculous. Who cares what he ate? We're not asking him any direct questions.
Patience.
This guy's manipulative. He's leading us on.
Quiet. A team left to check into his story and find the butcher. Everything Vangeloven had said was true. The only discrepancy was that, according to the witness, he was probably mistaken about the day that they met and spoke.
We checked in with the butcher, but he has some doubts about the day you two met.
Really?
He says it was a different day.
At that point, he must have thought, I messed up. It was a point of contradiction, one of the first in his narrative. And that's very important. What struck me the most was that from Saturday evening on, he no longer had any contact with anyone. It was as if he had completely cut himself off from the world, from other people and the outside world, which led me to believe that it was during that time that he detained the children, eventually sequestering them and finally eliminating them.
So, the next morning, when you woke up, what state were you in? What did you do?
I cleaned up, returned the keys to the agency, and bought a newspaper.
Why did you buy a paper?
For the classified ads, I told you.
Right.
But I soon realized that there were no classified ads in my area. On the other hand, I did see, quite obviously on the front page of the newspaper, the photo of the two girls who'd run away from home.
We said to ourselves, this is it. And then we had to be clever to make sure we got it right. For us, it was a step in the right direction. We wanted him to start talking about the girls from Elne of his own accord.
He used a term that made no sense given the context, namely that of running away. He said the little girls had run away. Now, the press, the media, everyone was talking about a suspicious disappearance, a kidnapping, and a possible abduction. But at no point was there any mention of running away.
He might have been playing a perverse little game. If I give you this detail, what will you be able to do with it? I dare you. I think there was some of that too. An element of manipulation. A desire to have the upper hand over the other person, and to get a sense for his interrogator.
At 11 a.m., I left for Perpignan on the main road. That's when I noticed all the police and all the people looking for the girls.
We still didn't know enough to confront him directly, so we had to let him slide further down the funnel. We needed to keep him coming back to the little ones without being asked.
Okay. So you arrived in Lourdes on Monday. What time was it?
Between 7 and 8 p.m.
Have you always had suicidal thoughts?
I told you.
But why? I'm trying to understand.
Because I'm afraid.
What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of myself. Of my other self. I went to Lourdes to ask the Virgin for two things, a job and a miracle. I wanted the Virgin to save me from my paedophilia, to cure me.
But you didn't receive a sign?
No. At the hotel, I wrote letters to my wife and children. I mailed them, and after returning to the room, I lit 2 candles, which I'd bought in a shop, and I knelt down in front of them and begged. I begged the Virgin to give me a sign. She never came. I felt alone, mentally, physically. You know the rest.
We got the impression that, in relation to his suicide attempt, it was like he was giving us a quote-unquote testament. But through that, I understood that he was no longer the same, that he was beginning to weaken. He was beginning to grow tired, and to understand where we were leading him, and where he needed to go.
Can we stop for now? I'm getting tired.
Yeah, we can take a break, don't worry. Just a couple of final things. Did you notice any villages between Perpignan and Collioure?
No, the only village that made an impression on me was Elne. There was another one whose name I can't remember.
Have you ever been to Elne?
No.
But you say you know of it.
Yes, because it's a village that you can see from the main road. I noticed there were some beautiful monuments, but I preferred to go back to Collioure.
So you didn't go to Elne?
No, never. Say, are you here to investigate the disappearance of the little girls from Elne? And not for my suicide attempt?
He knew that was why we were there. You could see it in his eyes, in his gaze, in his behavior. He lowered his head. You could feel it. It was clear that he had something to tell us, but he wasn't ready yet.
I don't think, bingo, we've won. We were still a long way from getting to the truth. But it was something that would enable us to target our questioning and change our approach.
Let's get back to Elne. You say you know about the village, even though you didn't actually go there. But there are other villages on that road, so why do you remember that one in particular? What's so special about it?
It's true, I do remember it, because on Monday,
October the 21st, when you left Collioure.
I saw 3 police vans there.
And what else?
Nothing else. There was a row of plane trees along the road.
Is that all?
I must have remembered the name of the village because I'd read it in the article about the missing girls.
How? How did you know it was Elne?
Because it was marked on a sign. Elne. A sign facing the police vans.
How many times have you been to Elne?
Must have been there 3 times, but always on the main road around the village. I never set foot in the centre of Elne.
Didn't you call your wife?
Yes, but that was in Orléans. I never went to Elne to call my wife or buy anything. Really, can't we stop now? Because I feel like we're just going round in circles.
Yeah. Just a few last details to clarify, and then we'll... He didn't want to talk to us about the village of Elne, but we asked him specifically to tell us about what he did there, the details and what he noticed. And as we were pushing him to make a mistake, he finally did. Let's go back to Saturday, October 19th. You said you were visiting Perpignan in the afternoon. What time did you leave?
5 p.m.
You went from Perpignan to Collioure?
Yeah.
And on the road between Perpignan and Collioure, did you notice anything in particular?
No. I can't be sure, but I don't think so.
Were there any red lights on the road?
I don't know. There wasn't much traffic.
Nothing unusual at all?
In one of the villages, there was some rough stripes in a sort of burgundy colour to announce a speed bump.
Where?
A village on the way to Collioure.
Why did you notice the stripes?
Because they're rare. They're new. Make a funny noise when you go over them.
Well, that was an incriminating element.
We had taken note of the specificity of those speed bumps, which are ochre-colored and make a specific noise when a motor vehicle passes over them. And there's no way around it. Those speed bumps only exist in Elne, at that precise location.
We didn't say to him, "You're lying to us." We didn't confront him directly. We let him come to the realization himself. So you arrived and then?
Arrived in Collioure. It was twilight.
Twilight. What time is that for you?
6.
What did you do then?
Did some housework. 6:45.
You like cleaning, huh?
I like things to be clean, especially when I'm borrowing someone else's apartment. I ate dinner, watched a bit of TV, and lay down in my sleeping bag.
In your sleeping bag?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
So as not to dirty the sheets. I even brought my own pillow.
Okay. We'll stop there for now.
It's 1 a.m. Christian Van Geloven has now been answering the investigators' questions for 9 hours. During a short break when he was allowed to rest in a cell, the police checked their intuition. There's no doubt that the only burgundy-coloured speed bumps are in Elne.
There's something you should know. The burgundy-coloured speed bumps you mentioned don't exist on the main road. They only exist in the centre of Elne. Do you understand what that means? It means that you were inside the town. Can you tell us anything more about the village?
No, I don't remember anything. I don't even remember going through the village.
When did you see the burgundy-coloured speed bumps?
Must have noticed their colour. Saturday morning, on the way to Perpignan. I don't remember if there were lights or anything. I don't remember anything.
You told us you saw a traffic circle. Where was it?
Yes, I saw a traffic circle, but I don't know where. I don't know which village. It was before or after Elne, but it wasn't inside Elne.
You went into the village.
No, I'm telling you, I didn't. I stand by that. I had no reason to go through Elne.
Where were you around 5:30 p.m.?
Certainly closer to Perpignan than Elne.
What were you wearing?
Black shoes, jeans, blue polo shirt.
And what car were you driving?
My car. White Volkswagen Polo.
He had to have gone into Elne. He had to in order to see the little girls. When he said he was wearing blue, it was over. I knew it was him.
It's 3:30 in the morning. Christian Van Geloven is returned to his cell for a short time. Since he was taken into custody the day before, he has only had 3 hours rest.
It was a very sensitive moment. I knew we were past the point of no return, that we were very close. The pacing was good, and we were almost there. I also knew that Christian Van Geloven was tired, both psychologically and physically, and I decided to intervene because I knew that that was when I would be able to break him. Come here. How is everything? How are you doing? Are you being treated well? My mother is Dutch. You can trust me. It's time. For your good side to outweigh the bad. If I'd had to kiss him on the mouth, I would have done it, without question. For me, the most important thing was figuring out where the two girls were. It's because you're ill. And you know Article 64 is all about criminal irresponsibility. You told us about your impulses, and it's true that you're ill, but you need to explain.
Article 64?
Yes, you know, when people are sick like you, they're not considered responsible for what they do.
Article 64 of the French Penal Code refers to insanity. And he was interested, you could see that he was. We explained to him that it wasn't up to us to apply that article of the law, that it was up to the judges, the psychiatrists and so on, but he was clearly interested, and he was clinging on to it.
I don't want to go back to prison with all those savages. Do you know what they do to guys like me?
But we can protect you.
I'm scared. I want a lobotomy.
Have you ever heard of the Casabianda prison in Corsica? It's a prison without walls, without watchtowers, in the open air where people like you are watched over and taken care of. We can make sure you get in there.
Are you sure?
Yes. That's not up to the judge. Sit down.
I've raped dozens of girls.
Sit down. You're going to tell me everything. It'll make you feel better. Have a seat. Have a seat.
I'm a monster.
No, you're not a monster. Sit down.
Saying to someone in police custody, you're sick, you're crazy, or you won't be able to be held criminally liable because you're not responsible for your actions, is a common investigative technique. Just like when they say to someone, once you confess, you're halfway to being forgiven. Say you're guilty and the court will take that into account. In and of itself, it's not shocking. It's just the way it is.
So, last Saturday.
Around 11 o'clock, picked up a hitchhiker. He was going to meet some friends at the Perpignan swimming pool. I dropped him off. At the poolside, there were about 50 girls doing synchronized swimming. I was attracted to the body of one of the girls. And I felt an uncontrollable urge.
What kind of urge?
Ever since I've been a paedophile, it's always been the same. My mouth and palate dry up, my heart starts racing, and I start shaking. I feel sick.
He goes off in search of something to satisfy his urges, which for him is a source of pleasure. And then, if you will, if that urge actually overtakes him, at that point he says, it's not my fault, it's the urge's fault. What did you do next?
I left. As fate would have it, I had to pass through Elne. And I noticed the phone booth next to the traffic circle. There were two little girls, about 10 years old. They were playing. A blonde and a brunette. They were playing pretend telephone. I got out and started circling my car so as not to scare them.
How did you approach them?
I asked them if they knew where there was a booth that took cards, because that one was coin-operated. They said there was one near the station, so I asked if they could take me there. They got in the back of the car. Gave them the Asterix comic I'd bought at the Lestrade in Perpignan, and off we went in the direction of Collioure.
He schemed and plotted, buying a leash to make it look like he's lost his dog. He bought newspapers, children's magazines and Asterix comics. He didn't act on emotion or impulse, contrary to what he said.
And then?
At first, I wanted to take them home to their parents. But then I had the idea of dropping them off along a busy road farther away, beyond Le Boulou, so that they could hitchhike home.
So why didn't you?
At the Le Boulou crossroads, I decided that wouldn't work. So I continued on towards the mountains, and then I stopped. I noticed that Ingrid was starting to worry, so I decided to get rid of her first. It was getting dark. Around 9:30 p.m. That was when I realized the situation had become irreversible for me. I took a piece of rope I had in the car. I used it to tie her hands behind her back, without pulling too hard, and then I wrapped the rest of the rope around her neck.
At that point, he explained to us how he had strangled Ingrid and Muriel. He was calm, mechanical, and then he wanted to get rid of the evidence.
We thought, well, they're dead now. They're really dead. And we thought of the parents too, because we knew the parents. All we would be able to tell them was that their children were dead. We had been hoping to be able to tell them that we had found the girls, alive.
You have to tell us where they are.
This was the crux of the matter, because until he gave his confession, there was nothing to link Christian Van Geloven to the disappearance of the two children.
If he clammed up, we would have a homicide without any bodies, which was the worst thing that could happen to us.
They have a right to a grave, a burial ground. A place where they can rest in peace. The parents have a right to know. Even if you don't do it for them, do it for your children. Think of your children.
Around 5 p.m., I left by car. It took me a while to find a good spot. I headed for Lodève. At one point, I came to a plateau, and there I found a path that went deep into the countryside. By chance, I came across a chasm surrounded by barbed wire. Took the bodies out of the trunk and threw them into the abyss.
When we told this to the other investigators who were waiting, I saw my colleagues listening, and they were crying.
I'm sick. I need treatment.
Yes, I know you're ill. We'll do our best to take care of you. But first, you've got to take us to that abyss. Do you promise?
He admitted to having killed the girls, but at no point did he acknowledge the seriousness of the affair, the torture he had inflicted on them, torture of a sexual nature. The forensic examinations proved the reality and the extent of that violence, which he attributed to the bodies falling into the abyss where he threw them.
You have to sign your statement.
So, you admit that you kidnapped Ingrid van der Portal and Muriel Sanchez in Elne on October the 19th, 1991, with the aim of violating their modesty, and that you deliberately killed them that same evening. Answer: yes, I recognize the facts as I have just related them to you on November the 2nd, 1991 at 10:30 a.m.
In Elne, at the home of Ingrid van de Portal, I met with the parents again, namely the mother. And that's when I told her, unfortunately, what must be every mother's worst nightmare, that she would never see Ingrid alive again, that she had been murdered. And all I could tell her was that I had arrested the man who had murdered her daughter. That's it. That was the most painful part of the case, for me.
The next morning, Christian Van Geloven took the investigators to the edge of the abyss where Ingrid and Muriel lay. Two years later, the man known as the Monster of Elne was sentenced to life imprisonment with 30 years without parole. Christian Van Geloven said nothing at his trial and remained silent in front of the examining magistrate, then died in prison in 2011, taking some of his mysteries with him. The hours he spent in police custody that night in the Saint Dizier police station remained the only time Christian Van Geloven ever pulled back the curtain to his crimes and torments.